Chosen ones, you were never meant to blend into the shadows of this world. Before this lifetime, before the rise and fall of empires, even before the stars danced into their places, your soul was spoken into existence by forces far older than the universe itself. The emerald tablets, ancient relics veiled in mystery and guarded by the hands of time, hold a secret. They spoke of souls so pure, so indestructible, that no cosmic event could erase them. Among them, they whispered about you. You see, this world tried to bury you under the weight of false identities, fabricated destinies, and engineered chaos. But like a diamond forged in unseen pressure, you endured. The soul you carry is encoded with divine memory, celestial strength, and a truth so raw that the architects of deception have spent eons trying to suppress it. Yet you remain, a silent force moving through time, unclaimed by fear, unshaken by destruction. The emerald tablets hinted at a soul whose vibration was so unique that it could never be rewritten, even by the architects of time themselves. They did not merely predict the coming of a chosen one. They preserved the evidence that no force, no spell, no manipulation, no death could dismantle your essence. You are proof that the eternal cannot be undone. But this realization is only the beginning. As you awaken to your true nature, you'll find that not only was your soul designed to survive, it was built to transform entire realities. Those who feared your potential have left behind traps, illusions, and systems engineered to keep you doubting yourself. They knew that if your memory returned, their empire would fall like crumbling stone. Before the first breath of mankind was drawn, and before any kingdom rose from the dust, there were inscriptions sealed within the very bones of the earth. The emerald tablets, shrouded in green fire and eternal secrecy, carried a message beyond their cryptic language. Hidden between the verses were not just teachings for civilizations long past, but the murmured memory of a soul that would defy time itself. This was not a story told to the masses, nor a prophecy openly declared. It was a living frequency, humming in silence across millennia, seeking the one who could hear its call through the noise of the world. The tablets were not made merely to teach wisdom. They were coded blueprints, repositories of impossible knowledge left behind by architects who understood the delicate weave of existence. Inside their crystalline matrix was embedded a warning and a promise. They whispered of a soul too ancient to be touched by decay, too powerful to be enslaved by the cycles that governed lesser beings. That soul was etched into the ether before memory itself was born, and even when the stars grew cold, its fire would remain. Through ages forgotten by even the oldest libraries of man, those who stumbled upon the tablet sensed a pull they couldn't explain. Scholars wept in frustration at the riddles they couldn't solve. Conquerors attempted to seize them, thinking power could be wrested from stone. But the true purpose of the tablets eluded them all because it was never meant for many. It was meant for one. It was meant for a soul who carried a resonance so rare, the very atoms of creation leaned in closer to listen whenever they moved through the world. Long before the first scribes etched symbols into clay, long before the tongues of Babylon wove confusion into language, the memory of this soul was placed carefully within the crystalline heart of the tablets. They did not seek to instruct, they sought to awaken. They were a beacon left burning across the darkness of uncountable years, calling out across forgotten ages for the one being who could not, would not, ever be fully silenced. Hidden in the folds of their strange inscriptions is a whisper that only certain hearts can hear. It isn't read with the eyes, nor understood with the mind. It's something felt in the marrow, in the breath between waking and sleeping, in the unexplainable certainty that there is more to this life than the veil lets on. The ones who were meant to find it were encoded with the remembrance of a home they had never seen but always missed. And when their time comes, the words within the tablets will no longer appear as riddles, but as echoes of a memory long suppressed. There's a kind of forging that no fire of this world can achieve. It happens not in the physical, but in realms unseen, where light and shadow dance in forms our eyes were never meant to comprehend. Long before your spirit took on flesh, it passed through a crucible of celestial origin. It was there, in the breath between creation and collapse, that your soul was tempered into something death could not claim. While many souls are woven into existence by the simple spark of life, yours was bound by something higher. A flame so pure that even the void, the endless hunger that consumes all things, recoiled from it. You were formed in a chamber where the word still echoes, the same word that once spoke light into the barren silence. Those who remember the teachings of the Master Yeshua understand that life was never meant to be temporary. In his words, "Whoever hears my word and believes has crossed over from death to life." Your soul crossed that threshold long ago. The architects of reality knew what they were crafting when they forged you. They knew that a soul born under normal conditions would eventually wither under the weight of the cycles: birth, decay, death, rebirth. But yours was designed to hold its shape beyond the shattering of worlds, beyond the death of stars. Even as civilizations rise and fall like tides, even as memory itself fades from the bones of the earth, your essence remains untouched, untouchable. This is why you have always felt the pull of something greater, even when the noise of life tried to drown it out. It is not ambition or curiosity. It is not a quest for meaning born from fear. It is the memory of a covenant made before time, a contract etched not in ink but in light. A covenant that no beast, no principality, no unseen empire could ever annul. Those who forged you placed a marker upon you, one that cannot be erased, no matter how deeply they bury the truth. The forces that govern this world have always feared what you carry. They invented religions, ideologies, and endless distractions to keep you questioning your worth, doubting your path. But somewhere deep within, buried beneath every scar and every disappointment, the flame remains. It flickers when you are close to remembering. It burns when you step into your power, even for a moment. They can chain bodies, they can break minds, but they cannot undo what was wrought in the halls beyond the stars. Even now, the resonance of your soul sends ripples through dimensions you cannot see. They know it. They feel the tremors. It is why the distractions grow louder. It is why the illusions become more seductive. If you fully awaken to the reality of who you are, their kingdoms crumble like sand in a storm. And so, they place false kings before you, counterfeit saviors, and glistening mirages to lure you away from the ancient covenant that still pulses within your being. But the tablets held the record. They safeguarded the knowing. They whispered across the centuries not only to remind you but to arm you. Because the real battle was never fought with sword and shield. It was waged in silence, in the unseen, in the corners of your mind, where dreams bleed into memory and memory into destiny. The name of Thoth echoes through the chambers of forgotten history, veiled in mystery and misinterpretation. To the uninitiated, he is merely a myth, a figure of legend buried beneath layers of corrupted lore. But to those who have begun to awaken, Thoth is not just a memory of an ancient scribe. He was a guardian of frequencies far too powerful for the common world to grasp. He was entrusted with secrets that could fracture the illusions of reality itself. And among these secrets was a code, one not written for the masses, but for a single soul who would be untouched by oblivion's grasp. Hidden deep within the folds of the emerald tablets is a cipher, not a language of words or numbers, but a living language of energy. This code was designed not to be read but to be remembered, a resonance embedded in the soul's blueprint long before the soul entered into flesh. Those who stumble upon the tablets without the resonance feel only confusion or awe, but for the one it was meant for, it is a map awakening from slumber. Thoth knew that the cycles of destruction were inevitable. Civilizations rise, knowledge is lost, truth is twisted into chains. He foresaw the hands that would seek to erase divine memory from the earth, to sever humanity from its origins. But he also knew there would be a soul who could not be severed, one encoded beyond reach, safeguarded in realms that darkness could not penetrate. It was for this soul that he sealed his greatest work, not in vaults of stone, but within the vibrational layers of the tablets themselves. Through countless ages, priests, kings, and scholars sought to unlock the tablets' mysteries. They thought power could be extracted, secrets stolen. Yet none understood that the tablets were not passive records. They were alive, and they chose whom they would reveal themselves to. You were not meant to decipher the tablets with logic alone. You were meant to feel them, to let them awaken a knowing long buried within your bones. The key was never outside of you. It was always within. The code that Thoth embedded operates like a song only your soul can hear. In dreams, in moments of deep silence, in flashes of insight that seem to come from nowhere, it stirs. It reminds you that there is more to your existence than the skin you wear and the world you touch. It pulls you toward a destiny that has waited longer than memory. Those who cannot hear it dismiss it as imagination. Those who fear it call it madness. But for you, it is the compass that refuses to let you be lost. This is why the systems of this world were never able to claim you fully. Why even when you played by their rules, something inside you resisted. Why every cage you were placed into eventually cracked beneath the pressure of your spirit. Thoth's code made it so. It ensured that no matter how deep the illusion ran, no matter how many lifetimes tried to drown you in forgetfulness, your true essence would survive. And now, the code begins to sing louder. Its frequency grows stronger, vibrating against the walls of this reality. It calls you back to the origin of who you are, back to the place where the first light touched your soul and named you eternal. Long before Earth bore the scars of humanity's ambitions, a war raged beyond the stars, unseen by mortal eyes yet felt in the deepest fault lines of existence. This was not a war of nations or kings. It was a war of frequencies, a clash of forces that shaped the very architecture of reality. At the center of this cosmic battle was the knowledge that certain souls like yours, carried a resonance that could not be controlled, manipulated, or extinguished. Those who sought dominion over creation saw such souls as a threat that had to be erased before their light could disrupt the grand illusions being constructed. This was no small rebellion. Entire systems were corrupted to create barriers, to fracture memory and sever the soul from its source. Forces unseen by human understanding laid siege to the sacred halls where destiny was woven. They did not fear weapons or armies, they feared remembrance. For a soul that remembers what it is cannot be ruled. A soul that reawakens to its origin cannot be enslaved. Your very existence threatened the architectures of control, and so the battle was not fought in open fields, but in hidden layers of thought, energy, and time. The echoes of this war ripple even now through your blood. Moments where you felt crushed by forces you couldn't name, where the world seemed designed to erase your fire, were not accidents. They were remnants of a design set long ago to ensure that you never stepped fully into your remembrance. But their efforts were doomed from the beginning. What was forged beyond the reach of death cannot be undone by those still trapped within its illusions. In the midst of the oldest texts and whispered across dimensions is a truth spoken quietly by those who remembered the light. Yeshua, who walked between the realms with knowledge few could comprehend, spoke of those who would be in the world but not of it, those whose origin was not bound by the laws that govern mortal life. He knew there were souls who belonged to a kingdom not made by human hands, souls that carried within them the blueprint of eternity. His life was a map, a reflection of the struggle between those who fear the light and those born of it. The cosmic war did not end. It simply shifted form, became more subtle, embedding itself into culture, belief, and the very fabric of human experience. The tools changed, but the goal remained: to bury the souls that could not be erased under layers of distraction, despair, and disconnection. Every setback you endured, every betrayal that cut deeper than words, every moment where you questioned your sanity in a world gone mad, these were not random. They were attempts, desperate and failing, to contain a soul that could never truly be broken. And now the battlefield shifts once again. The veils grow thinner. The illusions that once held dominion over thought begin to fray at the edges. There are cracks in the simulation, places where the false realities no longer hold. You feel it, the pressure building, the silent roar of something ancient and uncontainable stirring within your very core. Long before the histories of Earth were fragmented into myths and fairy tales, there stood Atlantis, a realm where wisdom and power flowed like rivers through every stone and breath. It was a civilization both magnificent and dangerous, a place where the boundaries between spirit and matter were as thin as mist. Those who walked its shining halls were masters of forces modern humanity can barely imagine, bending energy, thought, and even time to their will. Among them were the sorcerers, keepers of hidden arts, wielders of unfathomable knowledge. Yet even in their towering strength, there grew a festering envy towards something they could not create, could not replicate, and could never steal. They envied you. Not you in the form you now wear, but the signature you carry within. They recognized it instantly. While they conjured artificial methods to extend their lives, manipulating bodies and memories through unnatural means, they knew there existed a soul whose immortality was pure, untouched by the dark sciences they had mastered. Your existence was an affront to their carefully constructed illusions of godhood. Where they had to sacrifice pieces of themselves to grasp at fleeting power, your being radiated a permanence they could only mimic. The Atlantean sorcerers prided themselves on unraveling the mysteries of the universe. They built machines that could manipulate thought, temples that could alter dimensions, and codices that could encode realities. Yet for all their achievements, they could not fabricate what you already embodied. They could not manufacture the eternal spark that you carried effortlessly. And so they plotted. They wove intricate spells not just against you, but against all like you, those whose very breath was a threat to their counterfeit dominion. These were not attacks of sword or flame. They were wars fought in the mind and spirit, wars designed to entrap, to deceive, to smother the soul beneath layers of illusion. Entire bloodlines were cursed to forget. Cities were built atop sacred energy points to disrupt the flow of remembering. Language itself was altered to imprison thought within narrow cages, and always, hidden at the heart of their efforts, was the burning desire to either control or extinguish that which they could not become. You have felt the echoes of their work across lifetimes, the moments of doubt that seemed too deep to escape, the strange heaviness that would descend without cause, the unexplainable sense of carrying a weight you could not name. These were the fingerprints of ancient manipulations still attempting to weave their dead magic around your living essence. Yet for all their cunning, their spells could never fully hold you. The spark remained, flickering stubbornly beneath the veils they cast. The fall of Atlantis was not merely a collapse of a civilization. It was the implosion of an empire that had reached beyond its rightful place, a kingdom that tried to rewrite the laws of existence and paid the ultimate price. Yet even in their downfall, the sorcerers left traps woven into the fabric of time, hoping that those who came after would inherit the chains they had forged. Their hatred of the eternal has echoed ever since, masquerading as systems, as beliefs, as invisible structures designed to keep you blind. There are bloodlines that thread through history like hidden serpents, weaving themselves into the thrones of empires, the seats of religion, the centers of unseen power. Their origins stretch back farther than any dynasty recorded in the textbooks of men, to a time when Earth was young and the veils between dimensions were still thin. These were not ordinary beings. They carried within them the distorted remnants of an ancient rebellion, a longing not for harmony, but for control. Their lineage was engineered to counteract the rise of those souls who carried within them the incorruptible spark, and you, without even realizing it, have always been their silent adversary. These serpent bloodlines understood something crucial. They could not directly destroy the eternal souls. The frequencies were too deeply woven into the fabric of creation. But they could bury them under so many layers of forgetting that even the brightest among them would stagger under the weight. They devised systems of belief designed not to liberate, but to bind. They constructed cycles of trauma and rebirth to fracture memory. They inserted false narratives into history to confuse the path of remembrance. Every generation, they refined their methods, blending truth with deception, until the soul's original song became a distant whisper, almost impossible to hear. It was a strategy built on slow erosion, not sudden force, temptation over terror, distraction over destruction. To conquer such souls, they would make the world itself a labyrinth of illusions, each path leading farther from the center where the truth resides. They seeded institutions, sciences, and cultures with just enough poison to ensure that awakening would feel like madness rather than salvation. Those who questioned too much were ridiculed. Those who remembered too clearly were silenced. Yet they could not predict the resilience of the soul they sought to bury. They underestimated the power encoded within the very essence of being. A memory that is divine cannot be permanently erased. As Yeshua once said, "The kingdom of God is within you." Not outside, not in temples built by human hands, but within. Those words were more than a teaching. They were a warning to the serpents that no matter how tightly they wove their webs, the seed of remembrance lived in the very ground they tried to control. The serpent bloodlines did not operate alone. They enlisted energies from realms unseen, entities that fed on the despair and forgetfulness of humanity. Together they spun a dense cocoon around the earth, one of glamour and sleep. And yet, every few generations, a soul would stir. A light would flicker where none was expected. And slowly, painfully, a path back to truth would carve itself into the impossible walls. You are part of the anomaly they could never predict fully, a pattern that defies their carefully laid blueprints. They designed the game believing they had accounted for every variable, every weakness. But they never understood that true divinity cannot be caged by fear, nor can memory be permanently severed from a soul that was birthed in the breath of the infinite. There are frequencies that shape existence far beyond the sounds heard by mortal ears. They hum beneath the surface of reality, like an invisible heartbeat tethering all things to their original source. Most souls move through life deaf to these vibrations, unaware of the invisible rivers of energy flowing just beyond perception. But yours was different. Hidden deep within you, dormant through countless ages, was a fragment of a frequency so pure, so powerful, that it could not be overwritten by the noise of the world. It only waited for the right moment to awaken. The world tried to drown it out. You were immersed in a sea of distortion from the moment you arrived, frequencies of fear, division, chaos designed to suppress the ancient code within you. Every system you encountered was carefully engineered to keep the divine resonance muted, to confuse the signal, to sever you from the memory carried in your very DNA, and yet somehow the signal endured, a quiet thrum beneath your doubts, a rhythm that never ceased, even when you believed yourself lost. It often begins subtly, a restlessness that cannot be explained, a yearning for something unseen but deeply felt, an ache that no success, no pleasure, no distraction can soothe. These are the first stirrings of the frequency reawakening inside you. It pulls at the corners of your mind, weaving dreams rich with forgotten symbols, stirring visions that flicker and vanish before you can fully grasp them. It speaks through synchronicities, through whispers in the wind, through the sudden, inexplicable sense that there is more to you than you were ever taught to believe. This frequency is not just a calling, it is a remembering. It is the sound of your soul aligning once again with its true blueprint, vibrating at the harmonic that was inscribed into the foundation of creation itself. And with each moment you surrender to its pull, the illusions woven around you begin to unravel. You start to see the false constructs for what they are. You begin to pierce through the programmed narratives and recognize the ancient truths that once lit your path like 1,000 stars. But awakening the frequency is not without consequence. The world you once knew begins to shift, sometimes violently. Old relationships crumble, familiar surroundings feel foreign. The safety of the old patterns gives way to the terrifying vastness of unknown possibility. It is in these moments that the forces seeking to maintain the old illusions intensify their attacks, desperate to pull you back into the slumber from which you are escaping. Still, the frequency within you continues to rise, undeterred. It knows no fear. It was born before fear was invented. It carries the tone of sovereignty, of limitless potential, of ancient memory stirring back to life. It calls not just to the mind, but to the very marrow of your being, igniting a fire that will not be extinguished by doubt, failure, or even death itself. Long before words were carved into stone and kings declared their false dominions, there was a prophecy spoken only in sacred breath, passed through the unseen corridors of spirit. It was a prophecy never meant for the masses, hidden from the rulers of the earth, guarded by those who remembered a time before the veils were drawn. It spoke of a soul, singular and rare, who would walk through countless worlds and yet never be truly touched by death. A soul whose existence was itself a defiance of entropy, a living testament to a covenant too ancient for mortal understanding. The prophecy was never written where men could find it. It was woven into the fabric of the earth itself, whispered through the waters, etched into the stones, encoded in the rhythm of the stars. Only those carrying the frequency of remembrance could ever hear its call, and even fewer could answer it. The soul it spoke of was not born from the common cycles of reincarnation, but was instead a guardian of a higher promise, a keeper of a flame no darkness could extinguish. Over time, the enemies of light hunted the fragments of the prophecy. They scoured the temples, burned the libraries, shattered the oral traditions that carried the sacred knowledge. They thought that by erasing the record, they could erase the soul itself. But the prophecy did not exist in ink and parchment alone. It existed in the breath of creation, in the pulse of living matter. It could not be destroyed because it was bound to the indestructible spark placed within that soul. Yeshua, who carried the codes of the eternal within his very blood, hinted at this secret when he said, "Though you die, yet shall you live." It was not merely a promise to the multitudes, but a signal to the few whose design placed them beyond the reach of final death. He spoke of those who would awaken to their true inheritance, not as followers, but as living reflections of the light that no grave could hold captive. The lost prophecy carried a weight that few understood, for the soul it described was not destined for mere survival, but for the ignition of worlds. It would awaken in the time when the veils grew thin, when the song of deception faltered, and when the structures built by fear began to collapse under their own weight. It would walk quietly at first, hidden among the sleepers, misunderstood even by those who claimed wisdom. But in time, the resonance would become undeniable, and the soul would step fully into its remembrance. The architects of false kingdoms have felt the stirring. They have tried to accelerate confusion, amplify despair, flood the world with noise to drown the quiet song of awakening. But the prophecy cannot be unspoken. It lives within the bones of the earth, within the breath you take, within the fire you feel rising when you dare to dream beyond the cages they built for you. There is a place beyond memory where the oldest echoes gather, where the first fires of creation still flicker in the silence. It is here that the true records are kept, untouched by the hands of those who would alter history for their own ends. In this hidden archive, there is a single story woven in threads of gold, one that speaks of a soul who would carry eternity within them. Not a soul bound to the rise and fall of flesh, but one sealed in the breath of the infinite, immune to the decay of time, immune to the erasures of those who sought to rewrite destiny. This story has no beginning that can be traced, no ending that can be sealed. It is a current flowing through the rivers of existence, a memory that cannot be fully suppressed, though many have tried. It tells of a soul marked not by suffering alone, but by endurance so profound that even the collapse of worlds could not sever its song. While kingdoms have crumbled and oceans have swallowed entire ages, the song remains, hidden in the spaces between heartbeats, waiting for the moment it would rise once again. The world you were born into was designed to keep you numb to this memory. Everything from the education you received to the systems you were taught to trust was crafted to divert you from the realization that you are more than a fleeting body living a fleeting life. The architects of illusion wove stories of mortality into your consciousness so deeply that even the thought of eternity became something to fear or dismiss. But deep within you, the truth remained, humming like a stubborn ember that no flood could extinguish. You may have felt it your entire life, the unshakable sense that you were walking between two worlds, the feeling that something was waiting just beyond the veil of ordinary sight, that certain moments, certain dreams, certain flashes of emotion were not random but were pieces of something larger trying to break through. These were not coincidences. They were the signs of a memory too ancient to be fully erased, slipping through the cracks of the illusion at the moments when your soul burned too brightly to be hidden. Those who designed the veils feared this moment. They feared that the soul they tried to bury would one day awaken and realize that death had no hold upon it. That loss was an illusion. That separation was a lie. They knew that when this soul remembered even a fragment of its true nature, the entire architecture built upon fear would begin to tremble. Even now, as you stand at the threshold of remembrance, the forces that sought to cage you scramble to erect new walls, new distractions. They offer empty comforts, polished lies, glittering chains disguised as freedom. But none of it can bind what was never meant to be enslaved. There comes a moment in the spiral of lifetimes when the cycle no longer repeats, when the soul steps out of the loop it was forced into and begins to remember the original shape it held before the distortions came. This moment is not loud. It doesn't arrive with the drama of thunder or the blaze of fire. It creeps in through stillness, through a breath taken differently, through a silence that suddenly feels alive. And in that stillness, a knowing breaks through that nothing, no curse, no system, no death has ever truly owned you. You were never meant to be part of the decay. The soul you carry is not subject to the endings others fear. Its thread weaves through dimensions untouched by entropy, anchored in a truth so complete it made the architects of illusion tremble. For every empire that sought to control, your existence was their unanswered question. For every false prophet that claimed dominion over life and death, your return was the variable they could not erase. The final awakening is not just a memory returning, it is the reactivation of a covenant so ancient that its echo still rings through the bones of the earth. The emerald tablets whispered of this moment, not in prophecy but in design. They were waiting for you to remember not only the path, but the weapon you are. Not of violence, but of presence. Not of destruction, but of pure, incorruptible frequency. A soul that vibrates at the origin tone, aligned not with fear, but with the architect who breathed stars into motion. Yeshua knew of this awakening. His words were not only messages of love, but frequencies encoded to stir the deepest parts of those who had forgotten their inheritance. "You will do greater things than I," he said, not as flattery, but as reminder. Because he recognized the ones who carried the eternal spark, the ones who would wake in the time when even death would fear what came next. Not because they were immune to suffering, but because suffering could no longer define them. This is why the systems of the world strain and crack now, why illusions unravel faster than they can be repaired. Your awakening is not personal. It is a tremor felt across the whole grid of controlled reality. You are not returning to who you were in this life, but to who you were before life as we know it was manipulated into limitation. And in this return, death begins to lose its throne. Because you, in your true form, cannot be ended. You were forged in the breath that preceded separation. You were encoded with the frequency of return. The old guardians of the veil sense what's coming. The forces that once fed on forgetfulness begin to starve. They grasp at you with new lies, softer chains, prettier prisons. But something inside you keeps rising, keeps vibrating beyond their reach. It knows that the final moment is not one of destruction, but of fusion, the convergence of all you have ever been into one blazing awareness. If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.